Hey, it's Victor from Social Firestarter. There's a lot of attorneys out there that ask about using multiple GMB locations, and there's a whole lot of information to really unpack, but I wanted to make a video to kind of quickly go over some of the details that you should know if you're looking towards getting multiple GMBs. Essentially, this is something that you should be doing if you have more than one office location. It can add a whole bunch of work each listing that you get, but I'm going to try and show you some info here that's going to let you decide if you should go ahead and file for another listing or not. So I'm going to go straight into it here with this map that I brought up. I was doing some measuring on this map, my map platform, but basically I was trying to measure out a good distance to kind of use as like a guideline as to how close to be registering new listings. So the thing with these GMB listings is that the visibility that it provides, it's very like geographic. It starts out as a circle, and the radius, as you get more relevance and more authority, especially more mentions online, it starts to grow and get much bigger. Now, it's important to know how far out you're getting visibility, because if you were to, let's say there's a listing right here, somewhere in the middle of Orlando. Let's say you have a listing there and it's visible and you're getting some customers from nearby, or maybe the rank is a little bit too low, but regardless, you have a radius of visibility somewhere around here. If you were to drop another listing within that radius of visibility, or really anywhere that's a little bit close to it, you do end up risking a whole bunch of different things from happening. So one thing that can happen is that it gets confused because it's so close to this location that Google doesn't really know which listing actually represents your business, which one is the main entity. It doesn't really make much sense to have two locations that close, so the algorithm ends up getting or having a lot of trouble trying to understand which one to provide visibility for. So obviously Google has implemented plenty of measures in here so that if you were to just drop a whole bunch in one area, basically what happens is they all cancel each other out and only one of them actually becomes visible. So if you're thinking about the two office locations, if they were to be too close and you filed that extra listing, only one of those would actually gain visibility online. So that's a really big, the first thing that I wanted to mention, that could really end up deciding what the campaign looks like, especially if you're not sure which location is actually providing the phone numbers, the callers. So another thing that you should worry about is brand dilution. That's like the best way that I can really describe it. And it happens when, if you're thinking about how the algorithm is categorizing the mentions online, whenever it sees somebody reference your brand name, whenever it sees a link being built towards any one of your properties that represents your business, it has to make a decision as to what listing to attribute all of these mentions to. So if you have more than one listing and they're not clearly divided, you didn't organize them in a way where it's very easy to understand that there's two different ones, then the algorithm can end up getting confused as to which one to attribute. And then basically, as far as all your efforts for SEO, they end up getting divided in half, or maybe divided multiple times if you went ahead and got too many listings in one city. So I guess that kind of begs the question, how many listings should you get in one city? Well, typically you only need one in one city. A lot of times it does not make sense for you to get another one unless there's a special situation, especially in large cities that are very, very populated. And when you start thinking about the information, that Google can pull from cities like this, it's just so much more, it's more dense. There's more density to this city as far as the information goes. So I'm going to try to explain a good amount of distance that you might want to use here to try to judge whether or not the location is going to be too close to be ranking on Google. So in this example, I started with the first location being in the middle of Orlando here. So I placed another pin over here. So this is in Winter Park. Now, if you know Orlando, it is segmented into a bunch of these little neighborhoods. And when you get all this density with information, when you get so many different neighborhoods being referenced online within one city, it basically ends up creating all these little locations, all these labels on Google Maps. So you should definitely check out all these labels just to see what's being pulled up on Google, because they do kind of they do understand these as their own little sectors of the city. So in that case, with cities that are larger, a lot of times you can find a reason to have more than one location. So that's why I picked Orlando to look at here. And then let me pull up the distance between these. So this is about 8 miles apart, if you want to try to use that as a reference. But a lot of times I've noticed, and I measured this for a few different cities and a few different situations that I've looked at, but I would say this is probably the minimum distance. If you want to set a minimum distance, I would say this is a good one to use. I've definitely seen plenty of campaigns run where as long as there's this much amount of distance, the radius, the radii won't actually touch each other. So that's pretty much what you would want to do. But other than the distance that is dividing these two locations, it's just the fact that Winter Park actually has a whole lot of, it's just so segmented. There's a lot of mentions that are specific to Winter Park, and a lot of times it's almost like Google creates its own little classification for Winter Park because it sees so many prominent locations that are, instead of saying they're located in Orlando, they're saying they're located in Winter Park. So you can kind of incorporate that into your campaign as far as the mentions, as far as the references that you make on your website, in case you were to be located like in a neighborhood like this and you're really trying to dominate that location. Focusing on that specific word, the specific the neighborhood name is going to make a huge difference. But if you were to have two locations here, you would optimize this one using mentions of Orlando specifically. And then if you can basically have your entire campaign organized to where each location has its own listings, its own citations, its own profiles, its own links. If you can divide all of this up, and especially if you go ahead and use Winter Park to differentiate these, you're going to have a lot more success than if you didn't. And so that's one way to deal with multiple locations. And to kind of go further into that, if you're worried about diluting your brand in a situation like this, I would actually go ahead and, this is obviously the Orlando location, but I would honestly go ahead and place within the title of the GMB, I would actually go ahead and place brand name and then dash and then Winter Park. Just because in this situation, it is actually compliant. It's not regarded as keyword stuffing if there's an actual need to differentiate these, because if you don't, you end up running into issues with dilution. So that's pretty much all I wanted to include in this video. I guess one last thing I can mention, if you're looking at the different locations on the map, you'll start to see, Winter Park Country Club, Hospital, Winter Park Rehabilitation Center, Winter Park Church. So you can start to really see why Google places its own label right there, which is really interesting. But I think it's definitely something you should do, is just check out the location before you go ahead and start listing your GMBs, as well as if you're thinking about expanding to a different city or a different neighborhood. But yeah, let me know if you've got any questions. Have a great rest of your day.